Yeah. Welcome. Starting a bit late. It's multi-network community thing, October 2nd. No, it's not October 2nd. Apologies. October 9th. We just mentioned about KubeCon plans and our talk in KubeCon US coming next month. And yeah, Lionel, I saw your there's a good discussion on the cap. I saw Antonio approved your stuff. Where the team managed to look at it?
Yes, I got a lot of comments today. Um, I uh, I don't really know what to answer for some of them.
Oh.
Um, because, for example, there was a discussion about reporting the MAC addresses for network interfaces.
Uh-huh.
I don't have specific use case. I had use case before for that, but not anymore, I believe. I could
For
provide
which
use
one?
case for the MAC address being reported as part of the
Oh, yeah,
network info.
I see.
Um, so I don't really need that. It's cool to have, but I don't really know how to if I
Yeah,
should
and this
remove it
is,
or.
I think this is what I even mentioned. I saw, Doug, your comments about what we do in Multus. Do you know that all the like Multus's like return values are used? Do you know?
Well, at least what I know is that certainly in specific instances, some of those are very important. And I would say the ones that I hear about the most are actually the physical device specific stuff.
Yeah,
And
PCI, right?
so yeah, like stuff like that. And here I'm just refreshing it and seeing that there were a bunch of comments on my own comment here. So I'll have to fish through that. But yeah, also I've noticed that over time we've had to add more. So, people came and said, "Hey, I want to add a thing." And at least the way that that spec is, I personally feel like iteratively adding to it is not so bad, especially when they're optional fields. I feel like it's not API breaking kind of stuff. Um, and so yeah, that's kind of the like root of my concern is like things might need to be added. And then at least from my perspective, and it looks like this is one of the questions I'm gonna have to answer is I think that it's nice to users when this data has some kind of standardization behind it. I
Mm,
think that people
yeah.
feel like they can rely on this data and they don't have to necessarily retool their applications in different environments and different drivers, etc. So personally, I feel like it's a good community thing to do.
Mm,
But yeah, I'm open to ideas of how um, potentially we could handle that, including in this group as well, right? Like this could be a
mm.
good target zone to say like, hey, do we in this group do we feel that we could make use of having these values be standardized? Is
Yeah,
there interest
exactly.
there?
So I think we can look at some of them, and I was looking at, we managed to go over that last week, and basically, yeah, not this the fields you're proposing, Lionel, I agree, they are just nice to have. I think the most important ones that we definitely need currently is the IP, right?
Yeah, but the IP is a bit controversial because I put the CIDR also instead of the only the IP.
Yeah, I saw that one. So now it's a and who was that? That was Sean, right?
Dan,
That was saying, or that was Dan. Who
Dan
was?
and Tim Hawkins are for having only the IP.
Yeah. Why would we want to have CIDR? I assume that's easier for us, but what will that give us?
It doesn't hurt to have the CIDR because it's like 3 characters in addition, and it gives more information than just the IP in
Dag,
case you need to.
You have been commenting on that CIDR as well, right? Weren't you? Or was that someone else? I think that was you or Dan.
Maybe it was Dan.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I had
yesterday read something yesterday. Yeah,
I did
so
have a reference to it. Yeah, at least to be like, hey, here's what my mapping looks like.
Yeah.
And so it fits some of it, but not all of it. Yeah.
So what do we have a pushback towards, Lionel, now? I think the driver is good, pool was good.
The data. It's no longer a list. It was a list last week.
I saw that. Yeah, I don't think that's hurt us. You can still create the data inside, right? List.
Yeah,
inside.
You can create whatever you want inside. So
we still have it. Nobody's against having that opaque data, right?
No, nobody is against.
Okay, that's the most important, that we can have some opaque stuff. So I think that's still a win. So you can push any data to your heart's content and do whatever you wish. I think that's what most important. They didn't cut the whole thing, so I don't think that's an issue. Having a list is just extra, which you just have to go around. I think now when I thought about it, the one downside of not having a list is that all your drivers, how many you can have, would have to know about each other so they don't overwrite the data right between themselves. So that's that. Maybe that's one thing. I don't mind that's not a list. And then network data, I assume team comes from the point of view to have the least viable list, right? Is that true?
I haven't understood the question, sorry.
So he wants to have the least the minimal values that you're really going to use. Like, what is the use case? That's, I think this is what you're saying. What's the use case to have hardware address, right? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So I assume interface name is very important because that's how you identify inside the pod which interface is what, right? This is very important for us.
There was a comment that was saying this can be changed and we can have the interface index also.
Oh yeah, I saw that comment. Yes. So yes and no. I know that can be changed, but you have to have like maybe, I don't know. Dag, do you have? I think that was yours comment or that was Dan's on the index.
Dan comments.
Okay, so yeah, index is definitely I think final, right? You cannot mess up with that one. So I think yeah, that's fine. Interface index. The index is global for kernel, right? It's not per namespace. Is that true? I think so, right? Anyone can confirm? I think that's from, I can see some of it. Thinks that's the case. And I think that's fine. I wonder the VF would have an index as well. Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. And then address. Yeah, I think the CIDR is as you said, Lionel. I agree with you. It's a 3 characters extra, and I don't think it's gonna hurt anyone. What's there is just standardization across other APIs. Is that what it is?
Yes. I mean, I could give you some use cases, but again, I'm not even sure if I will use them at any time. So
let me think. What would I want to do?
I mean, like I have a service IP on my pod that is configured, and the service IP is a range. It's like a complete subnet. The service can be accessed via this full subnet. So I want to know if it's configured or not on the pod. So I will put the service subnet on the loopback interface, so my pod can listen on any of these IPs.
Listen on service side there. So you would create a loopback interface to which you would assign the range.
Exactly. And I need to know
Okay.
if this range is like configured on the pod or not. So I would just go in the resource claim status.
Because most of the cases this will be /32, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not, because if you, let's say, I think Multus doesn't do that. I think this is another thing, because Multus always uses like MAC VLAN, IP VLAN, so it's always /something.
Yeah. Okay. For routing, but what I mean is that if you want your pod to consider local traffic a full subnet, you need to put it on the loopback interface, and this could be useful for services.
Yeah, I don't have strong opinions on this one, Lionel. So yeah, I don't know.
I mean, to me, it doesn't hurt, and it's the best opinion.
I think the fact of standardization, I think, does it matter? It will be only us using this, and we are building new stuff around this. We are completely want to move away because it's insufficient from pod status. So why should we be standardized with that one, with something? Why will we be standardized with something that is incomplete, right? We want to build something more complete. So I think that's I think could be the argument here. I will try to add some comments here then to that topic. Anything else? I think that's the only. Are there any pushback on anything else, on Lionel?
No, there was a comment on the alternative. It was Dan comment that was saying that he liked the gateway API way to report the status, meaning that it's another CRD. So your status points to another CRD. Or
there's
object.
an alternative.
Which I answer that we prefer to have it in the pod status in that way. I mean, if we want something pod status,
that's the best way. Where was that? Okay.
That's the question I have for this meeting is that if should we really push for this cap and try to get this resource claim status, or we should try to push even more for
pod status?
Yes.
To be honest, we haven't. So I will tell you this. What in pod status, if you go to pod status, right? What will be the alignment of the IPs to what? That's the question here. And what I mean by that is here you have explicit alignment to the claim. So you know this status belongs to that claim. How would you do that in a pod status, right?
So in the pod status, there is a resource field where there's another cap that returns the health status for.
I saw that. Okay, you mentioned that last time.
Yeah. And Doug also mentioned this during the device management meeting a few weeks ago.
And that idea, okay, I haven't been on the meeting. I wonder whether that idea was. I see what you're saying. Because you're right, I agree with you. If we had all the data clamped on the pod status, that's the best thing, right? Because then I don't have to now search for do additional calls, API calls, to get all those claims for each of the interfaces, right? And get the IPs. This way I just got one object, he already has all the data, right?
Yes.
So that's definitely better. And you're saying that
I added the comment to this in the chat, and there's a bit of context in Slack. So.
And is there any how I want to say it? Is there any interest in that approach? Doing in a pod spec?
Check on Slack. I think it's not possible because the way I'm not exactly sure because of the array. It's a bit complex. But if you check on Slack, you could send.
So I assume so. What happened here? Ooh. My problem with pod spec, pod status, I don't think they will allow us to do. Where am I here? Those are alternatives. Like for example, data will move away, right? I don't think they would want to have open text or open field in the pod status. And then those two, yeah, maybe. Because if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, resource claim status devices, this is very network specific, right? There will be plenty of other type of devices, let's say GPU, right? Won't use any of this data, right? So now, how you generalize that in the pod status? You see what I'm saying? Kind of, I think they are less lenient, they are more lenient on the resource claim on how the fields are done, and you can, for let's say networking, have something versus what will happen. It will be more, I assume that will be more strict on the pod status.
So you mean that if there's a field that is not used on or used only for some specific use cases, then it will not be accepted.
Yeah. That's one aspect. And then like hardware definitely will have to go away, right? At least that's my, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe now with the array, we push for everything. I don't know. But that's my assumption, that I think the scrutiny there on the pod status will be much higher. And most of these things will just not be there, right? You see that? You see what I'm saying? I think right now I'm very surprised that we are okay with putting data in a status, right? That's like, I can do whatever then, right? For a claim. Even if the network data will have some standardized, let's say the address piece, right? But then we can define in our work group here what is the state, what is the format of data, right? And we can start off of network attachment definition outputs, right? That will be our first object. That, okay, that's going to be it, right? That's something that we could do then, and our controllers, or I think the multi-networking work group, standardized on this, and then that's the data output that we do, right? That has everything there. So that's a big win here, but I don't think this will fly in pod. That's my just assumption.
It's certain. I mean, I agree. I know that there's going to be a huge pushback on that, which to me is really unfortunate, because I feel like it'd be the best service to users to have it directly there. I think it would be most intuitive, and I am already, somewhat concerned that DRA is a number of moving parts to get together, and I feel like in an extremely opinionated Kubernetes distribution, like somebody probably wraps this together and packages it up nicely for the user, and maybe they don't have to integrate with it a lot, but yeah, I feel like in terms of like community extensibility and use of Kubernetes itself, it's a little bit of a shame to be like, hey, instead of giving you the like completed picture, what we're giving you is a number of puzzle pieces, and now you have to put those together. So certainly to me, having it in the pod is intuitive and would be a service to people
Yeah.
using the platforms. But
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, but convincing people to extend pod, well, we know about that quite a bit in this group because we certainly asked around about it
Yeah.
quite a bit. So, yeah.
Yeah.
There's kind of I think a relevant discussion about this. Let me try to find the link. And this is just whatever community whatever procedure wise or whatever else you would want to say, but I want to send a link to a discussion about getting gateway API in tree, and I'm close to having the KEP thing, but there's some discussion that people are potentially against getting gateway API in tree instead of being CRDs. And I think that has to do with people's fear that it's going to take too long or be too hard to modify after the fact. And let's why is GitHub being maybe I have the wrong link. Let me follow up with that, but that's just a heads up is like other people are having like similar kinds of concerns, like when does it make sense for it to be in tree versus out of tree? And it makes me also ask the question of like, can this process be better in Kubernetes overall? We certainly have hit a number of log jams here. And this just brings up another one where like we're trying to make this more intuitive, right? So to me, intuitively on the pod object. But there's a lot of pushback for like not for like kind of freezing some of this these API elements in Kubernetes, at least from my viewpoint.
Mhm. Yeah. Let me try to internally talk with some of the folks about the pod approach. I wonder whether is there a traction for it or not. But I think we are in good path here. Any other comments, Lionel, to this one?
No, just someone added it to the agenda tomorrow for SIG Network. So, I mean,
Oh, really?
the KEP in general. Yeah, the KEP, not the pod status.
Yeah.
So maybe this could be brought up. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe this is where we can talk even about the we can kind of talk in a forum about the alternative. What will it take if we want to do instead of that, do this in a pod status, right? With everyone rather than just me internally probing that. Yeah. Okay. Any other topics you want to tackle today?
I have a question about the repo, the multi-network and multi-network API. I mean, the API, okay, we can specify what would be in this opaque parameter of the resource claim, but the multi-network repo, what are we aiming with it? Are we aiming to create a DRA driver for networking?
No, I don't want a driver unless there is some generic part that has to be created. But no, I want this to be a place where I, for example, create a controller that will enforce few things, right? And this is where we need to standardize. And this is coming from my KEP, and we all need to agree on this, of course, but at least that's in my thinking. This will hold, for example, a controller for enforcing single network or single interface per claim, or that kind of things in the claim itself, right? So you create a claim, we see, oh, this is a multi-networking type claim. It has to obey those rules, and that controller will enforce that behavior, right? Either through making and marking the claim ready or not, or whether that's going to be. I wouldn't want to make it a webhook, but we'll see what's possible. But I think something along those lines, where we have this will be the controller to enforce whatever we have to do. And lastly, what else it can do? It will hold, for example, in the future. It should hold, for example, the implementation for Gateway API, cluster IP support, or services, or what's not, right? So any multi-networking generic things, we would put it there. So Gateway API will have the APIs and how to do services, and then here you would write a reference implementation of the endpoint slice controller or something like that, right? To handle your cluster IP or creating the endpoint slices, right? For each of the networks or interfaces. That kind of thing. That was my thinking. So everything and anything that's generic, and we can create a reference implementation for it, because I am going to call it a reference implementation, because I don't want to block people from, I want to have my own logic. I want to have my own restrictions. Go ahead, do your bidding, right? The API is there, and here is some reference implementation on how we think this could work in standardized ways. But if you want to do something of your own, please go ahead and do that. Because we don't want to force, like Gateway API. I think this is where maybe we need to think about how that's going to go, how far we go with that. I heard feedback from the Gateway API experience that you have an API and then the implementations interpret things on their own, right? And then you end up with varying implementations and behaviors for some of the same fields, right? So that's something that we need to make sure we probably will try prevent from.
So, but could we have maybe a reference implementation using CNI in that case?
So that part,
because otherwise it's or Multus that would. I don't know if Multus would do that.
So I agree on you that for reference, I agree with you on some reference implementation, and yes, we can initially start with Multus, but one thing from I think I hear a feedback to not make it Multus specific, right? So multi-network should be across the board, but we have Multus ready, right? So definitely we could use that as a reference example. And when more implementation come in, I'm thinking about myself, like Google has something of our own, we would probably want to add ours as well, right? And that, what I mean by adds our as well, because is having end-to-end tests. I think that's the main thing here. To have a end-to-end test that's use Multus or use implementations AB if they are upstreamed, and basically test the whole thing that way. That's another thing I was thinking here to do, to have a proper end-to-end test for the API, the controllers, and then have some reference CNI to test the thing end to end, right? And I think initially we would just use Multus because we have that, right?
Yeah, but my question was not like reusing Multus, but having some kind of similar project as Multus is doing, like calling different CNI.
This was never the subject of this group, to create an implementation. And I don't want to go there, because there is already Multus, and maybe you have some other opinions on how this should be done, and I will have another one. So that's why we made this group, to create the APIs and enable everyone to go and do their own ways of doing things. Because Lionel, that's, I think, in my opinion, everyone's gonna have their own specific requirements and needs. So implementation, like creating a driver that's specific, and only that's gonna block people, right? Yeah.
I mean, the driver would just take the same as Multus, would take the CNI config and the CNI parameters, so
Right.
and report the CNI results. It would not
And
be.
what if
I
I
mean,
have implementation that doesn't use CNI config? What
yeah,
then?
yeah, exactly. But my question was like, should we have a driver that is very specific for CNI, because CNI is like the main thing for. I mean,
That's my problem, where I would push back, because then you locking into one approach, right? That's and I'm okay with that as an end-to-end test, to test our generic stuff, but to build and invest these groups into having something that's specific for one way of doing things, I'm not sure. You see my point, Lionel. Unless the
yeah,
driver or whatever we create is generic, and we need that as a shim layer between something and something, and then you can just create your own CNIs or that kind of thing, then I agree with you. Like, I haven't, yeah, I'm quite busy internally, so I apologize, I don't have much time to look some of your POC stuff, but there might be some pieces there that we need to enable, like the more like Multus things, right? Maybe there needs to be some driver that then does something, and it is very generic. It can be used anything to enable maybe the CNI path, as you said, right? At that point, yeah, let's have it that as a very generic thing that's anyone will have to have anyway to enable their type of work. Then I agree. Then yes, that can be part of this. But I think this is something that we need to define in the design that we need to write, right? I'm bringing this back up, but I pushing by on my own this, but this is where those pieces has to be defined, Lionel, and then that's and that will drive that what's going to be there. And to answer, I think, your initial question, that's why I want to have two repositories. First, to build the kind of the APIs, and then the other one to have any types of controllers or drivers or what's not we want to have, right?
But
And if we
my
need to,
point was, yeah, sorry, continue.
and if we need to split even that further, like to have every component in separate repository, we probably can do that as well in the future.
Yeah, because my point was like, okay, everybody can have this its own implementation, like Google, not using CNI, but if we want to have something that is like open source, and then that use something that almost, I mean, people that doesn't have their own implementation,
and I agree,
they could use
so
CNI.
it should be done in such a way that you can easily build your CNI to use this, right? Today we have Multus, so I assume that should be our first goal, to ensure that whatever we do, we create a guide. Okay, you deploy our YAML, and then you add the Multus YAML. There you go, and then this is how you're gonna use it, and that's it. That's how we imagine this, right? So 2 building blocks, but that has to be that, right? Because you have the generic multi-networking support, and then you pick one of the implementers, and that's in this case Multus. So this is where we always, from the beginning of this meeting, was always the envision, right? We're gonna define a common API that it was supposed to just be API with some maybe controls built in, and then you need to add a implementer to that implementation, right? The goal was never to create an implementation, right? So at most and at least 2 component building blocks. I think, Doug, you mentioned that we shouldn't build multiple puzzle elements, so that we don't make it too complex. But I think if we have 2 components, that's good, right? That's not so bad. What do you think?
Two components is fine. I certainly, and maybe if this group isn't the right group for it, that's fine. But I do think that implementing what we're creating here from one aspect or another would be really good, productive feedback into what we have here. And certainly, coming from a Multus perspective, I've kind of been trying to solve it, and this is to me is bigger than just multi-networking, but it's like what Multis does, and what Multis was intended to do, of course, was be a CNI multiplexer in order to get multiple network interfaces in pods and Kubernetes. But by doing that, it bridged the gap of two APIs, the Kubernetes API and the CNI API. And I've been trying to figure out like what is the better home for a technology like Multis, which to me is very much a like glue code kind of thing, right? To like glue these APIs together. And I've been trying to figure out like instead of gluing those together, can this be like custom machined into the equipment in one way or another? And I want to try to figure that out. So like from an implementation standpoint, I am interested in a community implementation, and certainly, I do see lots of merit to how we've defined it in this group, which is let's focus on the APIs, let's give people opportunities to create implementations. I do think that that's healthy as well. So I see it kind of from two parts, but I'm not sure. It's like there's a lot of stuff up in the air between this group itself, with what's happening with DRA, and then whatever. Like I don't think that it's as hot as it once was, but with like mention of like a KNI, like is there a way to rethink, how CNI and Kubernetes work together? So I'm certainly interested in reference implementation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think that this group alone has to do that, or
Yeah.
that it should be a requirement. But I don't want to quelch interest in it because I have some myself.
Yeah.
And so
And
go ahead.
And that's fair point. Like bringing up KNI, right? That's something that like KNI might be more structurized rather than open JSON text, right? More structurized approach to this. If I'm not sure whether that can be done by that, but then you can have something even more robust in terms of APIs for your side rather than right now the CNI APIs, right? So I think that's where I agree on the KNI side. Definitely, that's something that Lionel, I think this kind of proves my point that we shouldn't lock ourselves into just CNI, right? That's what I'm trying to bring up, where we just define the control plane at up top, right? And then and the APIs, and then you do your bidding however you wish, right? Those are the standardized return values. This is how you would pass them into the pod. This is how you would provide some parameters to parameterize your networks and identify the network object, right? In your implementation, and then do your stuff based on that, right?
If I may add, I mean, no, I understand that it will always be also beneficial to have a set or at least a couple of DRA drivers, because sooner or later, though it could be connected to Multis or to any CNI, it could also influence direction of CNI specification. If that is also another purpose for multi-network, where CNI 2.0 have at least some, let's call it the basic parts of that could later on be used by KNI or others. But yeah, and the reason it's because we are just starting the journey. I'm still thinking how, for example, network policy API should evolve, because at the end of the day, at least today, they are enforced by CNIs. So we have a connection in there. So maybe the repo you mentioned with generic parts, one or a couple of drivers might help also influence how the other APIs will evolve.
And that's fair, but I don't think we are at the point, Machine.
No.
I think we need to define, and this is where the next step can be for us, right? To look what sort of gaps we are. Okay, we have the top level control plane APIs. Now we are implementing our drivers, and now we are noticing gaps here and there. Maybe this is what will drive us right from here to that, right? But I don't think we are there to define that, and I wouldn't want this currently to be around that part, around any CNI related stuff, right? That should be right now. I want to put that as an abstract and focus on the high level APIs only, so that then the drivers can drive some of the implementations. That's at least
We too early, but still sooner or later we have at least to describe how potentially the usability of those multi networks. I mean, we are at the edge of getting that you describe your needs, you probably get back some results, their status and so forth. And later on, there are a few other things to build on. And yeah, we will front that as well. How a generic or a general purpose network policy API should look like. Does that require current CNI vendors or new ones to adhere to new sets, and where do we describe that? I'm not saying we should do it, just sometimes, go in further into the security part, because you need to make sure that is part of it. And then if it's gateway API or next generation of services, it builds on. And somehow we will, if multi-network will drive or trigger some of those community discussions, there will be a need for the generic parts. But I agree with you, it doesn't have to be a lockdown realization, but a way to validate the work that's being done.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah. So you mentioned keep in mind that you mentioned the CNI part. I think what's we have in our cap at least our kind of roadmap or requirements that we want to tackle for this group, and I think we should stick to that. And I think the next item, bigger item, would be that I can think of is how do I think I see two download API down in the pod. So how do I pass some of the networking information that I know of into the pod spec? Right, that's one part. So all the status that now Lionel is adding to the claim, how do I know that passed to the pod? That has to be defined. That's one aspect. And the other aspect that definitely is on the table is the services for multi-networking, right? That's a big one, which will involve gateway API. So I think those items I would tackle first rather than just go before I go to the CNI. And there is a whole list, right, to what we discussed last year on all what has to be tackled. So
yeah.
You say that we are on the brink, but we are on the brink of doing the first phase, right? We need to define the next other items that we had around on our kind of list to do before we go there and do some of that, right? That's my kind of how I'm seeing this, right?
I share your view, Maciej. Yeah, no, totally
Okay.
right. Take the steps in the right order as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Pass down resources to see. I'm not sure someone pasted those items. Is that related to the pod status?
Well, somewhat. What the discussion here is that we're going to add additional pod metadata when you do run pod to be passed down into the container runtime, such that virtual machines, confidential containers, whatnot, can know what's going to happen with the resources when the containers come in, right? Today, too much of that information is being held inviolate, right? Hidden from the container runtime. We'd like to expose more information. That'll include after this CAP has gone through and we get that additional pod metadata, that we will also pass that information down into the NRI plugins. So you'll have this ability to do a round trip with the these DRA things you guys were talking about in your CAP 4817.
So
This
do-
is-
do- does this mean that from the NRI plugin we can get the OPAC parameters from the resource claim?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's good because
That's
yeah, for
right.
now we need
If
to get.
We just have to make sure that that this seems to be the right pattern, right? That when you want to
Yeah,
run the
yeah.
pod, before we create the network namespace, we'll be told, what are the different CNI devices that have been pre-allocated for, by this claim, right? Which ones are being claimed, right? And then we can just give it to the NRI, and you should be able to at least opaquely look at it. If not, right, there may be afterwards an update API, right, for the pod metadata. So if you wanted to attach another network, again, we would just have another event inside of NRI so that your plugin would be notified. Okay, here, now it's being updated. We're adding additional network or removing one. Just want to make sure you guys noticed that this was also happening.
Okay, thank you for bringing this up. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. All right. Any other topics? If not, then let's call it. If you can, please attend tomorrow's discussion on SIG networking so that we can push forward the status from Lionel. All right, thank you.
Awesome.
See you next
All right,
week.
Thank you all.
Tomorrow,
All right, bye.
hopefully. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers, everybody.